Thank you. All right. I don't want to blast everybody out, but if the people in the back can hear, then we're okay. All right. I want to welcome everyone tonight out of this cold, cold evening. Thank you for showing up again, as you so often have, and hopefully will continue to do so. You know, it's our 14th year of the Tony Woiak History Festivals, and that's kind of amazing. But it's due to the wonderful enthusiasm that the audiences bring. So thank you for being here. I also want to remember to thank the Harbor Table. They have not increased our rates in all that time, and I'm telling you, they give us a deal here, and they set up all the chairs, and they set up all the equipment that we need to put things on. So we need to remember that they're really being helpful to us. And then I've got two reminders before we begin. The first reminder you may have heard before, it's that the equipment that we just purchased a couple of years ago is very expensive, and we don't want it damaged, and we don't want any of you damaged. And there are cords running back and forth, and there's a crew of us that take down the equipment so we can take it back to storage at the end of the evening. The natural kind of inclination for people in the audience sometime is to, when our speaker is done with the programming, they say, you know what, I should have asked him this, and they come forward to ask those questions. Or they say to themselves, I wonder if he knows about this. And so they rush forward to share some information, which is wonderful, but what we've asked is that our speakers, our presenters, would then move to the back of the room at the end of the program. So yes, by all means share, and by all means stick around, but not up front here. So that's the first reminder. And the second reminder is we have only one program left in the winter series. The winter seems so long, and then suddenly it's getting over with. So one more, it's 2 weeks from tonight, and it will be Mike Powers talking about the history of the Chequamegon Area Choir, which is an amazing choir. This year again it has, I think, close to 70 members, which is pretty amazing. And it's been in existence for over 50 years, and he's going to tell that story. So that will be next. And Mike Powers, by the way, is the current director and has been for, I want to say like 35 years or something. It's a long time. So please come back for that. All right, those were the reminders, those were the thank yous. And now I'd like to say a word or two about our tonight's presenter, Bob Mackreth. Bob Mackreth's participation in the Tony Woiak History Festivals goes back to the beginning of the Tony Woiak History Festivals. In fact, the way I heard it, it was Bob's idea. And he thought it would be a great thing to help people pass the winter nights. And so he pitched the idea, and between the Washburn Area Museum and the Washburn Heritage Association, which are the two organizations that partner to sponsor these programs, they took it to their boards, and it was endorsed fully. And so all these years later, here we are. So thank you to Bob for getting it started. Not only did he, some people just have ideas and then they walk away. Bob has presented in the 14 years, if I've counted right, and if before this season, it was like 15 different presentations in 13 years. This season, he's going to be speaking tonight, of course, and he's agreed to speak next summer also. So then it'll be 17. In 15 seasons, 17. So yay, Bob! So we do appreciate that very much. And so I guess I just ask you to give Bob one more time on this very, very cold night, a very, very warm Washburn welcome.
Thank you very much. It's very flattering. Am I on here? Press the right button there. We're doing technical stuff. We'll be there. Yeah. I guess you can hear me. All right. I'll get away from the speakers here, because that kind of, well, I'll change my pants later. Seriously, I am very honored that y'all came out on a cold night like this. And thank you, Ginny, for the introduction. Yeah, I won't belabor the point, but yeah, this whole shtick was my idea in the beginning, and some wonderful people picked it up and did a much better job than I ever thought it could be done. I thought maybe if we really worked hard, we could get it to run 3 or 4 years, but so many wonderful people have gone with it. And the reason, going back to the very beginning, and I'll move away from that soon, I wanted, how could we honor
You know what, it's plenty.
my late friend and many of your friends, Tony Woiak.
Back in the back.
Tony
Too loud for the.
probably did more than just about almost anyone else
Turn it down a little.
who publicized, preserved
Just a touch.
history of Washburn. He's a self-educated, absolutely dedicated, wonderful guy, and he passed away much too soon, and I'm glad that we're honoring his memory all these years later. With that out of the way, I'm going to talk about somebody who's like the exact opposite of this sort of fellow who's different. A.C. Probert, let me just give you a little hint. He was a dirty, rotten, low-down, horse-stealing, pork-flushing snake in the grass. And that's an introduction. But he was a heck of an interesting character, and, good guys aren't always that interesting. I mean, it's the bad guys who make for good stories. So let's talk about this fellow. A.C. Probert, Washburn's great scoundrel, and then it turns out lots of other towns too. Who was he? Where did he come from? What did he do? We're going to explore that for the next 45 minutes, 50 whatever. Mr. Probert, Arthur Clarence Probert, was born in Paterson, New Jersey in 1862. Paterson, New Jersey, didn't much to talk about today, but in those days it was kind of an important industrial center. It was located on the fall line. What's the fall line, you ask? Well, it's a geological thing where you got the rivers that come down, and then they go down waterfalls and on their way out the coastal plain. Fall line marks the limit of where you can navigate by boat, and also with the waterfalls and stuff, with the rapids and all, you can use it for water power. And in those days, Paterson, New Jersey was a booming industrial center, and today it's kind of a pit. But that's what happens a lot of times. But he didn't spend a whole lot of time there. By the age of 22, we find him in Mason, Wisconsin, working as a clerk at a lumber camp. And then in 1887, he shows up here in Washburn. He's 26 years old now. Shows up in Washburn, which at the time, Washburn was only 4 years old at the time. It was a boom town, very much a frontier town, rough and ready, open for business for an ambitious young man. And Mr. Probert was ambitious to a fault. He came to a town where the tallest building was a grain elevator. He left quite an imprint afterwards. Showed up, as they say, age of 26. First thing he does is establish a bank. Probably wasn't anything fancy. It might have looked something like this. In fact, it was located in one room of the city hall at the time. Building's not there anymore, but yeah, it was a small thing. He had this idea. He was a banker. And remember, I'm talking about a guy who was only 26 years old. Talk about ambition. When I was 26, I wasn't thinking of opening a bank. But in any event, the other thing he did very quickly, he built himself a nice house over right across from Jackie's Field. It's still there. And you notice it's got the mounting block getting up on your horse. It says 18 ACP Robert 87. I think that's supposed to mean 1887, but it's a typo or something. Yeah. And before long, he's got his fingers everywhere. One of the things that's most significant, he was the main mover and shaker, or at least this is what he claims, and I tend to believe it, behind moving the county seat from Bayfield to Washburn. He didn't build the courthouse here, but he was the guy who made the changes that made it necessary. And so you Bayfield folks here, you're allowed to hate him now. So yes, that was his thing. He was a promoter, okay? An entrepreneur, a BS artist, and a lot of other, do you remember Billy Mays on the commercials? Hi, Billy Mays here for OxyClean. He would have been a shrinking violet next to Mr. Probert here. And so yeah, he's behind the move of the courthouse, pretty much. I mean, it was a community effort, but he was the fellow who pushed it through. And he had his fingers everywhere. He initiated the first electric company in Washburn. He bid the lowest bid and built a whole powerhouse, like the streets of Washburn. He was the guy. He also established a brewery. Yeah, brewery up where the school is now. But really, what he was most interested in was the bank. That was his main occupation, or should I say, his main scam for most of his life. And Washburn News, the bank building construction started in 1889. They took about a year to build it, and they opened it up on New Year's Day, 1891. And the Washburn News gives you an idea what an amazing place it was for a little town like Washburn. The finest building of its size in this section of the state. And so far as a general convenience in all things which go to make up for a fine banking institution, it is eclipsed by very few in the West. The furniture throughout is of cherry, elegantly finished, and elaborate design. The counter, which fronts two sides of the room, is surrounded by an elegant rail finished in cherry, brass, bronze, and plate glass. Wow! Beside the vault, the bank contains a fine safe supplied with one of the most improved time locks. The lock alone costing $300. And that would have been a real bundle in those days, well into the five figures. Yeah, his bank. Oh, and the other thing with his bank, I mean, really, it was way more of a building than a little town like Washburn needed at the time. It was really a monument to his ego. And I actually found an early daguerreotype of what it looked at in the beginning. And, he wanted to refer to it as Probert Tower, but later on that sign came down. And that was the end of it for him, because
Lots of gold inside.
in 1893, a nationwide panic, a worldwide panic, sparked by the failure of a bank in Argentina, of all places, with ripple effects all through the world, reached its way to Washburn, and Probert's bank went broke. He swore up and down, though, that he would get it back together again. He arrested him, actually, for various fraudulent transactions, but he came up with the money and was back into business again. Now, one thing that's interesting to me is in those days, Washburn had two newspapers, and they had diametrically opposite views of Mr. Probert. The Washburn News here did not care for the guy. On the other hand, the Washburn Times just loved him. So, as we go through his history, you can get two varying views depending on which paper you're reading under the microfilm reader. So, yeah, he gets away with it now. A year later, in 1894, he manages to reopen, hires a brass band, literally. They have a whole big ceremony for reopening the bank. And peace has returned, and life is good again, right? Well, not really, because he gets arrested a couple more times, and then he has an accident down at the powerhouse. According to what the newspaper said, one of the most frightful accidents which has ever happened in Washburn occurred at 3 o'clock Tuesday morning, and as a result, town chairman A.C. Probert, the victim, lies in a critical condition at his home in the city. Mr. Probert is president of the electric light company and is a piece of property in which he takes great pride, and he visits the plant very often. It was not at all unnatural that he should arise from his sickbed Monday night when sleep failed to come and visit the lighting plant. He had been there for some time, studying the different points of machinery, as was his favorite pastime. When the accident occurred, and in some manner he slipped and fell upon the brushes of the dynamo and received from the shock the full force of the machine, which was at that time 1,350 volts. Wow, that sounds rough. 10 to 1,200 volts is enough to kill most any ordinary man. But Mr. Probert's rugged constitution has enabled him to stand this much greater shock. He has always enjoyed perfect health and has a fine physique, which is the only thing that will save his life in this distressing incident. You know, I was thinking, guys, get a room, okay? You know, really, we know you think the world of this guy, but come on. There's speculation from the other side of the coin that he knew that things are going to go south very fast and that he was taking the easy way out. Decided, but we'll never know. But we do know that, oh, the Washburn Times thought the world of the guy. But what happens next? He's already had accidents. He's already, has been arrested once. His bank has failed. So what's the next thing? He bounces back once again. He's like one of these, we called them happy hooligan toys when I was a kid. You punch it, it bounces right back up. And there's nothing left for him to do but to go into politics. That's right, he runs for mayor. And despite what's already a kind of shady background, he's elected. And I will, not really mayor, because Washburn wasn't a city at that point. It was still a township. So he was town chairman, but in all intents and purposes, he was the mayor of Washburn and acted like it. He had his fingers everywhere. Also was the chairman of the school board. And then it goes south again, because just a few months after electing a mayor, his bank goes bankrupt again. And the bank is sold. The brewery goes broke. How in the hell do you break down a brewery in Wisconsin? I mean, for heaven's sake. Talk about a foolproof industry. And by this point, he's also got two more banks. He's got a bank in Shell Lake, and he's got a bank in Prescott, which is down toward the southwest border, almost right up along the Minnesota border. So he's got three banks. He's got a brewery. You know, he's got an electric light company. Wow. Energy. This man, whatever else he had, really had energy. The scruples kind of lacking. And he's arrested again. Washburn Times predictably said, his arrest is simply an outrage. Mr. Probert's arrest was no doubt brought about by a coterie of men who have been hounding his every move since he resumed business after the suspension of his business 2 years ago. The Times firmly believes that Mr. Probert has made an honest fight to clear up his business affairs, and come what may, nothing will make us believe otherwise. I'm thinking, yeah, I already knew that. You kind of get the feeling that if Probert got up in the middle of Bayfield Street and shot a couple of people, they'd still endorse him. I don't know. But talking about always landing on his feet, his term as mayor is expiring. Election, and guess what? He's reelected. Some people, I don't know. Well, 2 months after his re-election, beginning of his second term, this time he's arrested and it sticks. First trial was a mistrial because they couldn't get the jurors to agree, and there are those who say that he got a hold or got to one of those jurors with a little, emoluments. So they declared a mistrial, ran it through again. In the second trial, the jury deliberated for a half hour, found him guilty. And according to the Washburn News, the other side, they actually reached their verdict in 10 minutes, and the rest of the half hour, the 20 minutes there, was taken up with filling in the forms they had to do. So yeah, they decided he was pretty guilty. And what happens next? He takes a trip to lovely Washburn, Wisconsin. Yes, indeed. Sentenced to 2.5 years. I don't know how they came with that. In state penitentiary. And the Washburn Times is upset. The exultant birds of prey shriek loud and shrilly over the remains of a ruined man. The fiendish delight that some that found expression in Washburn was befitting the beast, but with no credit to any man possessed with a spark of humanity. Sorry guys, it's over. Well, maybe not. So anyway, he's down there adjusting to prison life. And a convict from Washburn writes up to one of his friends. He says, our mutual friend A.C. Probert registered as a guest here after dinner Saturday. I assure you the poor fellow feels very blue. Today, no doubt, is the longest day he's ever spent in the world. I think he expected something a little better, and he's disappointed. But as I told him last night, he will be all right as soon as he convinces himself that he is Probert the convict, not Probert the banker or mayor. Well, that wasn't satisfactory to Mr. Probert. He was in the habit of trying to figure out the angles. And sure enough, he managed to get himself a job as assistant to the prison chaplain. And this was a very privileged position because among their duties was receiving the mail from the inmates. And guess what Mr. Probert did with his fellow prisoners' mail? Ooh, money. Yeah, he was stealing from his fellow prisoners there in the chaplain's office. And it really blew up in 1898. 1 year into his term, a year and a half into his term rather, there was a complicated scandal in which a Native American named Moneypenny got a check for $55. $55 in those days is equivalent a couple of thousand these days, literally. So Mr. Probert said, this belongs somewhere else. And he took it and he handed it to the chaplain, and the chaplain went and cashed it for him. Ooh, Padre, this is not good. When all that came to light, Probert had a ready reason for doing it. He said, I saw that and I knew that Mr. Moneypenny owed money to a lawyer down in Madison who did work for him. So I just simply sent the money down to the lawyer. No, I don't remember his name. Well, actually, it didn't really result in much blowback for Probert, but the chaplain was out on his butt. Another year later, Probert is released, and it says, A.C. Probert, who conducted a bank at Washburn and robbed the people of thousands of dollars, has been pardoned out of the state prison. He will become a lawyer and promises to make public a statement concerning the conduct of the prison at Washburn. Well, that's BS for a number of reasons. He never became a lawyer, and he wasn't pardoned. He worked his butt off trying to get a pardon, calling all his influential friends, and the governor just said, heck no. He served his whole term, but he went around telling everybody, yes, I was pardoned because everybody knew I was innocent. Right. The truth doesn't matter to him. Well, as I say, he didn't become a lawyer. He went to Michigan and became an MD. 1 year later, we find him in a small town called Niles, Michigan, running a hospital. And here we have it. Notes, so-and-so and so-and-so and Arthur C. Probert, graduate of the Independent Medical College of Chicago, are now registered with the county clerk during December. Yes, Dr. Probert. Now, there's a little bit of discrepancy as to how he got his medical training. Probert would tell people that he studied medicine while in prison. On the other hand, there's a newspaper report that comes up later that says he went to a diploma mill that offered a one-day course in medicine and gave you an MD afterwards. So yeah, I don't know, man, whichever. But to be honest, it didn't matter. He wasn't interested in practicing medicine. He was interested in selling MDs and certificates and other trinkets and toys to doctors all over the country. And one of his rackets was inviting physicians all over the country to become staff and get admitting privileges at his non-existent hospital for a small fee, and then promising them, and we'll give you a 5% kickback on any fees that we collect. The other thing that he did, he was selling certificates to put up on the wall, and well, he went into great detail, very, very florid prose about just how wonderful these certificates and diplomas and things were that we were selling. Yes, these certificates are outlined. Let me see here, changing the glasses here for a moment. These certificates are artistically lithographed and set forth that the holder has been regularly appointed to the honorable ranks as a member of our staff of physicians, surgeons, and specialties. These certainties are a great attraction in any physician's office. They're truly a beautiful illustration of the higher art of the lithography, and on and on and on. And then he ends at the bottom, heavy royal linen paper, $15. Imitation of parchment, $20. Genuine sheepskin, $25. And to get the context, folks, $25 in those days would be about equivalent to $900 today. Sounds unbelievable, but I checked it twice on the Consumer Price Index website. Yeah. Selling these phony pieces of paper for up to $900. And there were people who bought them. Comb through newspapers, and you'll find like some doctor in Kansas has put out a little press release or whatever. The newspaper in this small town in Kansas is a wonderful compliment to our own Dr. Alice Gregory. She has been admitted to, she's been granted admitting privileges at St. Luke's Hospital in Niles, Michigan. And I hope that made her feel good, I don't know what. But he made a mistake. He pissed off some dentists. He claimed also not just to be an MD, but also a DDS. Now, dentists are a tight-knit group. They got a network, the dental network. And Michigan Dental Society got a hold of some friends in Wisconsin who got a hold of some friends up here in Ashland, and we get this nice note. Dear sir, everything I have said about A.C. Probert is a matter of public record. For a number of years, I did dental work for Probert and his family and visited twice while in the penitentiary. Called at my office several times afterward, and once after he became a doctor. At that time, he gave me his card, which read Arthur C. Probert, M.D., Secretary and Treasurer of St. Luke's Hospital, Niles, Michigan. You see, I know the man. I have no sympathy for those who buy such diplomas or certificates. They know what they're paying for is just as big fakes as a man who would sell things. Very truly, J.D. Williams, DDS. Well, there goes his dental scam. And really, his market's drying up for that particular racket. So, what do? You pick up and move. But one thing happened, and there was actually at least one poor guy who was referred to the hospital that didn't exist. Pennsylvania man goes to Niles Hospital. An invalid, an aged man, arrived here from Pennsylvania today where he was sent by his physician for an operation at St. Luke's Hospital. When the patient arrived, he found Dr. Granville, that was another name here, he found Dr. Granville, the president of the Association of Fugitives from Justice, and his assistant, Dr. Probert, away on a Western tour. The reason the old man went to Niles was because his local physician was promised half the operation fees from his assistant. The Pennsylvanian is disheartened. Yeah, well, he left a lot of disheartened people in his wake. But meanwhile, he's booked off to Indiana. And actually, he basically sticks in the same area for a while. Southwest Michigan, northwest Indiana, that area around there. And what does he do? He takes a break from the medical world and goes back to banking. The newly organized Farmers Bank of Bourbon, and this is this is 1901. Newly organized Farmers Bank of Bourbon opened doors for business today in the rear of Dr. Weiser's model block drugstore building with a capital stock $25,000. Its officers will be Arthur Probert of Niles, he's still living in Michigan, mind you, President, Dr. A.W. Weiser, Vice President, etc., etc. The bank will be doing a general banking, collection, and exchange business. Well, okay, another bank we got going. And that's not enough. Goes down to another town down the road. A.C. Probert, formerly of Washburn, this is one of our papers writing, started another bank, this time at Tippecanoe, Indiana, which, with his bank at Bourbon, Indiana, makes two banks he is now operating. And not only this, he is delving quite deeply into various schemes and manufacturing institutions down there and taking a lively advantage in that section of the company. And then the last line. Mr. Probert served a term at Waupun as a wind-up of his career at Washburn. You can tell which paper that came from. Well, yes, he does start a company down there, the Hutchinson Lock and Manufacturing Company, which is making doorknobs and locks and that sort of thing. And it gives the names Robert Hutchinson, President, Edgar Hazlett, A.C. Probert, Secretary and Treasurer. Well, why wouldn't he want to be Treasurer, right? So, yeah, he's got two banks and a lock and doorknob company. But then what happens? They put it fairly bluntly there. Probert wrecked another bank. Yes. His bank at Bourbon failed, and then shortly after that, his bank at Tippecanoe. And people were very unhappy. As a matter of fact, you see, they're feeling bitter about him. And he gets arrested again up there in Michigan, though. The crimes he committed are down in Indiana, and he's up in Michigan. And they actually, I take it back, they're not arrested him. He's walking around a free man up there. Although, as somebody wrote in one of the Indiana papers, the man who started a bank in Bourbon fleeced several citizens of that town and vicinity, probably escaped a state prison by flight, has an advertisement in the Chicago papers now, which is a fair sample of many other schemes to fleece the people. Probert probably never made an honest dollar in his life. And I'd say I have to agree. So one thing leads to another, and they issue a warrant for the guy down in Indiana, and it goes nowhere, because he's on the other side of the state line. And the governor is thinking about whether or not he should sign the extradition order. Yes, Probert went to Bourbon last fall, organized a company that manufactured door locks, etc., 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 and basically the governor is going to consider it. He considers it for several months while Probert walks around free, and then he says, no, I am not going to sign the extradition offer. Sorry about that, Indiana. folks here, the folks in Indiana, you'll see they weren't too pleased. As a matter of fact, they hung the governor of Michigan in effigy, among other things. So there was a little bit of hard feeling there, I guess. Well, at least they could joke about it. The glass in front on the front door of the late Farmer's Bank, his bank there in Bourbon, is adorned with a picture of a very ostentatious gentleman greatly resembling Dr. A.C. Probert, except the man in the picture represents a man several years older. Underneath the picture is this: A.C. Probert, as he will appear in 1941 when he returns to pay his depositors. Sometimes humor is all you got left. Well, once again, things get hot and dry up. As they say, he's in trouble again. This is the paper from Ashland. They're kind of keeping tabs on the guy, and they know him. He's in trouble again. Yeah, okay. But Probert is hurt. And he sends a letter to his the Washburn Times, and they give him a platform. Upon my return this morning from a business trip to Indiana and Chicago, I was surprised and annoyed by reading the yellow item, like trashy tabloid, in your last week's paper concerning the Indiana banks that I am interested therein. I did not know before that I had been arrested. Neither did I know that this writer and his cashier were ever in jail. I knew, however, that we were doing a perfectly legitimate banking business, and neither one of our banks had closed its. Guy was just lying through his teeth, easily disproven. He would lie even if they couldn't, if no one believed it, and it was about something everybody else could see. If it was true to him, that's all that mattered. So yeah, and one of our Washburn media gave him, like, say, the platform. Well, okay, time to exploit another town. He moves up the shore a bit to Benton Harbor, Michigan, and promises to build them a factory. The Searchlight Company gets in with a couple of partners. I'm sure if they were as crooked as he was, and they basically convince the town that they are going to build this great big manufacturing plant that's going to make lanterns for locomotives and various other purposes, and they're going to bring, Probert promises, we're going to bring 12 skilled workmen from Chicago, and then we'll hire about 30 to 40 here to start out with, but I expect this plant will bring about 200 to 300 jobs in the community very shortly. So everybody's opening their wallets and buying stock in the company. And of course, then he takes a powder eventually, and then goes to a small town. They'll go back into banking for a while. Eau Claire, Michigan, not our Eau Claire, but a much smaller town called Eau Claire, Michigan, opens a bank. A.C. Probert, one of the company to start the new bank here, was in town Monday. The bank will be open for business just as soon as the safe counters and other fixtures are forwarded. And it'll be in a few days, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I don't think anything got delivered by the time the bank went out of cash. Yeah, okay. I think the bank operated, such as it was, for about 2 months before Probert takes a powder again. Off to Chicago, where he gets back into the medical business. Establishes an institution called the Christian Hospital. Holy fellow. Yeah, well, that didn't last long. One of the things he did, which made a big mistake, is he put out a list of all the prominent doctors who are already associated with it. And one fellow in particular looks at it, finds it, and says, "Why, hell I am!" And he brings suit. And then charges ensue. And yeah, so much for that scam. They issued him a fine of $500, big money those days. Have no idea whether he paid it or not. But meanwhile, he's also a railroad magnate now. He's going to build a railroad. He's looking for investors in his new railroad out west, out in Oregon. Arthur C. Probert, general financial agent, Sutton South Street, Dearborn Street position, and now he's a railroad tycoon. Oh, wow. Yeah, it didn't last. And now here's the wacky one. Lawsuit for defamation between two socialite ladies, one of whom dissed the other in an anonymous letter that was circulated among her friends. And basically the lawsuit hinged on who wrote this nasty letter and circulated to all the ladies in this one town. Well, they called upon several eminent handwriting experts, including Dr. A.C. Probert of Chicago. How we managed to get to be a handwriting expert in this man? I must have had all the time in the world. Yes, he peddled himself out there as a handwriting expert in his testifying in this lawsuit. Yeah, well, things got hot for him, so now he goes to great lengths. And in, what year is this now? 1904. Well, he turns up again in Oregon, little town near Portland called Dayton, Oregon, where Mr. Probert opens a bank. He's got he's got this scanned down pat right now. He opens a bank, and for the time being, he's living in the back room of the bank. And when I say for the time being, I mean, this is another one of his banks that lasted 2 months. But in that time, he made a lot of friends in the community. He was a smooth talker. And one day, the bank doesn't open. Someone shows up there. Yeah. He's a prize, all right. People down here are watching him, and this comes from a newspaper in Michigan who are seeing all this go on. It's funny, they couldn't find anything about him when he showed up in town to warn people, but afterwards they took an interest whenever AP or UPI or whatever came over the teletype about Mr. Probert, even how trivial it was. So I jumped ahead, but the main thing is he went missing again. And Arthur C. Probert mysteriously drops out of sight. And this is scary now. Friends think it is a case of suicide caused by stories told of his past life. Yes. He was telling all these people, yeah, there are a lot of people who have it in for me back east, and they circulate all these horrible stories, hoping to break my resolve and ruin my reputation. And he's got these people turned around his finger. Yes, rising from his bed in the rear of the bank early this morning, Arthur C. Probert, manager and sole owner of the State Savings Bank, disappeared so completely and mysteriously that suicide is feared, especially as strange pistol shots were heard about that time in the outskirts of the town. The fears for Mr. Probert's life, held by his townsmen and the depositors in his bank, are founded upon the probable effect on his mind the various stories concerning its character, which have been circulated in the last several days, spread and broadcast apparently by some unknown enemy working in the dark to destroy Mr. Probert's business reputation. Talk hook, line, and sinker. Well, suddenly he's spotted again. Yes, I got it. Yes, go ahead there. Yes, he shows up at another town, some miles away. Mud bespattered, as though he had spent the night in traveling over the country roads. A man believed to be Arthur C. Probert, the missing manager of the Dayton, Oregon bank, arrived in Woodburn at an early hour Wednesday morning. Probert was last seen in Dayton at 11 o'clock Tuesday night. George Fitzgibbon, the traveling agent for Fisher, Thorson and Company of Portland, an acquaintance of the missing man, asserts that he saw Probert at the Revere House at Albany Wednesday night, and that Probert ate dinner there. From Dayton to Washburn, it is 16 miles to Woodburn, rather, 16 miles by the wagon road. Distance is 45 miles by rail. Well, they lose his trace there. He skates with not very much money. He only got about $500, which is hefty, but not a fortune. And as one of the local papers managed to point out a little later, Probert didn't steal enough from that danking bank to entitle him to respectability among thieves or a presidential pardon. You can't make this up. Well, where does he go? California beckons. He turns up again in 1905 in a little mountain resort town near San Jose called Ben Lomond. Ben Lomond, if you know the lyrics to By Yon Bonnie Branks and By Yon Bonnie Braves and Lomond and all. Yeah, it's a Scottish name, which got because the guy who founded the term was Scottish and he wanted to preserve it. But anyway, he shows up, and here's how smooth he is. First of all, he's smart enough, he decides it's time to change my name. He's no longer A.C. Probert, he is Clarence P. Davis. And the editor here of the local paper writes, for the first time, the writer had the pleasure of meeting this week Mr. C.P. Davis of Ben Lomond, editor, merchant, banker, and politician. 6 months ago, when in San Francisco, we learned the news that the outfit for a newspaper had been shipped to Ben Lomond, and that its owner was a man of means who intended to establish a newspaper and start a store of general merchandise. Smooth talker. And another paper says, another enterprise that is perhaps to do more for the town, that is Ben Lomond, than any other agency, is the establishment of a weekly newspaper, the Ben Lomond News, by Mr. C.P. Davis. Mr. Davis is at once genial, jolly, as well as dignified, and possesses a fund of knowledge gained from large business experience in eastern cities as mayor and bank president. It lets out, jailbird, but okay. Mr. Davis contemplates erecting a fine business block next year and starting a state bank. Okay, back to his themes. And you know what else he does? Starts a bank. Oh, and this is okay. I'm getting out of sequence here, sorry. This is one town I actually visited. A couple of years ago, I was out in California visiting a friend in San Jose, near San Jose, and it's only about an hour from there to this little town of Ben Lomond. So we took a drive there, and you know what? It looks perfectly normal. You don't see anything saying, Probert destroyed our town. I guess it finally recovered. But yeah, I looked all over for, scars and whatever. They're just, apparently, they recovered there. So yeah, he's got a bank, and now what? He's got a wife. And this, folks, it's almost horrible to say, this is my favorite episode in his life, because it's so dramatic or whatever that it could be a movie right in itself. Dr. Probert, Mr. Davis, age 43, shows up and embarks on a whirlwind romance with a woman in her 20s from a wealthy family, of course. They court for a while, and then all of a sudden, everyone is shocked to find they've just eloped. Yes, he didn't waste any time. Paper says, friends of Miss Olive Davis that will be surprised to know that she has become the bride of Mr. Clarence P. Davis. We wish the young couple the best, and blah, 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 blah. Turns the social life of the town into an uproar. But it works out. Everybody's fine. They have wholesome parties. Everybody has to know Mr. Probert. Works out fine for about a month. Because Mr. Probert has to take a business trip down to San Francisco. He takes the train down, and on the train back, traveling salesman looks him over and says, Dr. Probert, what are you doing here? I kid you not. Somebody who knew him back in Chicago outs him, clocks him on a train in California. Well, Probert thinks fast and says, no, I'm not Probert, I'm Clarence P. Davis, you must be mistaken. And the guy says, oh, well, where are you going? And he's traveling salesman says, Ben Lomond is my next stop. And Probert's going, shit. He stays on the train and just keeps going for several more stops, gets off in a town far away, and telegraphs his new wife, I got a little more business, it'll take me a couple of days. kind of skulks back on a train into town and just basically tries to lay low. His friend from Chicago spots him again. And Probert is going, no, I'm Clarence Davis. You must be mistaking me for somebody else. This traveling salesman is savvy. He says, oh, bullshit. He goes to the DA. And he says, I have absolute confidence that this man, Clarence P. Davis, is A.C. Probert, who's wanted in Illinois. DA calls him in. Probert comes in with his wife, who's kind of taken aback at all these sudden developments in her 1-month-old marriage. And he sits down with the DA, and the DA presents some solid evidence that you're not Clarence P. Davis, you're H.C. Probert. Well, this young woman is absolutely flabbergasted. And she asks the DA, can I just speak with you privately for a minute? And the DA, like a jackass, says, Mr. Probert, go wait outside. He didn't wait outside. He ran straight to the railroad station and took the first train out of town.
Wow.
Well, that didn't sit well with his new wife. Not well at all. And things got a little heated by then. So yeah, they were granted a marriage license. As they say, weds and prospers under false name. Husband of Fresno Society editor. Yes, she was the Society editor of the Fresno Democrat. If you have ever been to Fresno, California, I absolutely defy you to find me anything society-like there. I lived a couple of years in a place near to Fresno, and we called it Frespit. But yeah, she was part of the royalty of Fresno, except when she was in Ben Lomond for her holidays. And as it says, he hurriedly departs from Ben Lomond. I'm sorry? Yeah. Versatile captain of industry is charging with swearing falsely when he wedded a young woman last month. The sheriff now is looking for banker Davis. He comes back, gets to Santa Cruz. I'm not sure quite, it's a little unclear what he was doing, but he then turned around and disappeared again. Well, the sheriff is looking for him, and so is his former wife of 1 month. Yeah, she's not happy at all. But we don't see him again for a while, because he's gone again somewhere else. But before he does, a little set of sequence. Talk about nerve. He left all his luggage in his haste to get away. He left his luggage and all in a hotel there. So he writes back to the hotel and says, could you forward me all of my luggage, my baggage and all, and I'll pay you for it when I'm back in town next summer. Well, no. In fact, law enforcement opens the baggage, and sure enough, they find enough evidence here to prove beyond a doubt he's Probert. So he never comes back to Ben Lomond. Instead, he goes to Colorado. And guess what he does there? Anybody want to guess? Opens a bank, yes indeed. But also, he's a mine entrepreneur now. He's going to sell stocks in his mining company. And he wants to build a railroad. He's going to sell stocks in this narrow gauge railroad. It's down near Grand Junction. Not, okay. And he's going to build an opera house, too. This little town is going to become a major center in that part of Colorado. Yeah, And look, he's getting married again. Yes, indeed. Let's see, this is in September of 1906. County clerk has granted the following marriages. License A. Clarence Probert and Emma Wansmiter. So they tie the knot, and the next month from now, the former Mrs. Probert was finally granted her annulment. So essentially, besides everything else, now he's a bigamist. He was still married when he married wife number 3. Oh yeah, I forgot. He had a wife back here in Washburn. She ditched him when he went to prison. I should have mentioned that. She was smart. Little, eventually. But yes, so now he's not a bigamist anymore, I guess. He spends another year or so in Colorado, and then he decides the small town life isn't for me. He goes to Greeley, a much bigger town, and buys a thriving store, which largely catered to out-of-town prospectors and all, and they made a lot of money in cash. And it says here they had about 9 clerks, and he runs this for about a year, but then what happens? The store goes bankrupt. He had just sold a whole lot of stock in the store, too, raked in a lot of money or capital, but now all those stock certificates are worthless because Mr. Probert is nowhere to be found. So we're in Colorado now. Where does he go from here? Well, New Mexico is his next stop. Yeah. He goes to Mexico, Taos, to be precise, and he opens a bank. Come on, people. But this is different. If you look, it's the State Savings Bank, or the Banco de Ahorros del Estado. Apparently he speaks Spanish. Who knew? Clarence Probert, cajero, cashier. And he takes up doing business in Spanish. I don't know, maybe because anybody could read English would find out what he did all those other places, I don't know. But he opens this bank, which is obviously catering for the Hispanic population, and then he also founds a newspaper, La Revista de Taos, which I believe is like word from Teos or stories from Taos or whatever. And yes, Secretary and Treasurer A. Clarence Probert in this newspaper, and the newspaper is the Organo Oficial de Condado de Teos, official newspaper of the county there. And he becomes fairly well settled there for a couple of years. He's going to help build a railroad. He's selling stock in his railroads. And he's doing real estate now too. And he publishes an article in the paper about what a wonderful fruit growing area this is. Come by land in this Taos Valley. And finally, he's a miner again. But finally, he hits rock bottom. He becomes a politician again. A delegate to the state's Republican convention, where A.C. Probert of Taos took the platform, and in a fine oration, he nominated Malaquia Martinez for lieutenant governor. There were many flowery seconds, and Mr. Martinez was nominated by accommodation. So once again, he's a mover and a shaker and a big wheel. And 2 months later, it all goes to hell again. Taos Savings Bank closed today by state auditor. Word got up to the state banking authorities that this guy is not keeping his books the way he should, and we're wondering really if he's taking and skimming it or whatever. And they sent the top state bank auditor down there, and I found, look, these things were absolute mess. So what do? They arrested him. And meanwhile, our friends at the Washburn Times did their best to spread the news. Probert arrested in Mexico. Well, no, it's New Mexico, guys. I realize it's far away, but you might have a map. According to advices received from Taos, not Taos, mind you, but Taos, Mexico, A.C. Probert, formerly of the city, has been arrested and charged with wrecking the Taos Savings Bank. Yes, I know. He's credited with wrecking banks in Washburn, Niles, Michigan, 2 in the state of Indiana, 1 in Oregon, and 2 in California. Well, actually he left out 1 or 2, but... And he says, the United States said proved too small for him, and he went to Mexico. Well, no, guys, you go a little far. New Mexico was a state by then, folks. Come on. Yeah. Well, guess what? He's convicted again. Does he skate this time? Let's find out. He gets a long term in prison, sentenced to a term of from 6 to 8 years. It looks like we're finally done with him for a while. He's in his late 40s now, mid 40s now, rather. He's going to spend the next 6 to 8 years in the slammer. And newspaper in Hayward down here, gets the word over the teletype, and he writes, our guess that Clarence Probert, president of the defunct Bank of Taos, New Mexico, is the same genial bandit that operated in northern Wisconsin some years ago. And our guess is correct. And there are some in Hayward who regret meeting him and would have been richer as are following him and commenting him. Yeah, he's safe in his cell until he isn't. 2 years in, he's doing his best to seek a pardon, file appeals. In 1914, 2 years after his conviction, excuse me, 2 years, it was 1918 or whatever, I don't know. But the bottom line is, he doesn't spend 6 to 8, he spends 2 years and gets out. He settles down in Taos, at least for a while. Now here's the thing, guys. I gave a talk on Mr. Probert in one of the very earliest Tony Woiak programs. And at that point, that was where the trail ran cold. And what I said at that last time, this is about, like I say, 12 years ago, something like that. I said, we don't know what happened to him, but my bet, says I, is that he changed his name again, built a half dozen more towns, and ended his days cheating at shuffleboard in an old folks' home. Well, it's a good laugh line, but it wasn't true. And I want to step away from this subject for a moment. I want to let you know that probably a good half of what I just said came from this book right here. Okay? Shawanigan Bay and its communities, Washburn, the city to be, historical memoir, 1883, 1947. Folks, I will swear on my life, there will never be a better book, and more scholarly work, more comprehensive work than this right here. And just as an aside, I weighed it today. It weighs 5.5 pounds, and I'm pretty sure it's the heaviest book that I own that isn't a dictionary. This book was written at great length and in great detail and exhaustive research by a guy from Washburn named Lars Eric Larson. Grew up here in Washburn, went to, eventually ended up as a professor, PhD, Dr. Larson, at University of Wisconsin, Whitewater. He may have been lived in Whitewater for most of the year, but you can tell his heart never left Washburn. He took this seriously, and he dug into every nook and cranny. And every summer he would come up, and he had a trailer that he kept at West End Park, and they'd stay there several weeks every summer. His heart never left Washburn. And I was lucky enough to meet him several times. We corresponded now and then. My wife Susan back there at the museum got to see him even more often, and they got along well enough that Dr. Larson sent us copies of his books. Oh yeah, this is one of 3 volumes, folks. Oh, yeah. The others are a little bit thinner, but still, exhaustive research. Just incredible. And as I say, there will never be a better book on Washburn history than this one. It was privately published, and I just wish someone would pick it up and publish it so others can get it. And believe me, when I step away from the lectern, I'll leave my computer and all my other valuables here. I'm keeping an eye on this. Okay? Well, though, I do have one advantage that Dr. Larson didn't. When he did all his research 20 years ago, the internet wasn't like it was today. If he found newspaper article, that meant somewhere he found it in a library. I have no idea whether he went to California or Colorado to get them, but somewhere he physically got the newspaper, flipped through them manually, finding as much as he could about A.C. Probert. 20 years later, all of these newspapers just about have their archives online. I could sit in my man cave here in Washburn at midnight drinking a beer and do my research and say print screen, and there it goes. I had this humongous advantage. And that's the only reason why I can say that I got this thing that Dr. Larson didn't have time for. And that is, one day, searching and wondering and searching, I'm sorry, I forgot the photo. That's Lars, gentleman in the blue shirt at the left, right? Correct? That's great. That's a class reunion of Washburn, 1947. He went to the castle while it still was the castle, and not an empty lot. Yeah, hell of a guy and a hell of a scholar. But I found this clipping, okay, 1918, and I looked at it. I said, let me look at this. Oh my God! Muerte de hace Probert. I don't know much Spanish, but I could pick that up. Death of A.C. Probert. I yelled to my wife, Susan! Get out here! Am I right? And we looked at it, and Susan's Spanish is better than mine, and we combed through it, and it says, yes, Mr. A.C. Probert, ex-banker and president, and so on, died at his residence on March 28th. Pernicious anemia. He died in his bed. Kind of get feeling that he should have, been a more violent end or something, but that's not the way. But yes, I can finally put a coda on Mr. Probert. And one of the things, as we puzzled out the Spanish there, and thank you, Google Translate, it said he was a man of generous, magnanimous heart, a true, honest man, and he only came to grief by trusting the wrong people. And then you go back and you look at the newspaper's masthead, and he's the treasurer there. Yeah, it's his own newspaper. For Christ's sake. But really, what are we going to say about A.C. Probert? Gosh, where do I even begin? He was talented. He was dynamic. He had limitless energy. He could convince. As they used to say, they could sell refrigerators to the folks up in Alaska or northern Wisconsin today. Just brilliant. Really. Brilliant in his own way. There was only one thing he was missing, and that was a conscience. And I'd like to end with a couple of remarks of just how people felt about Mr. Davis, and really summed him up a whole lot of ways. The Washburn News, when he first was imprisoned at Washburn, pegged him down, I think, pretty well. The defendant in this case has been a resident of Washburn for about 9 years, has held offices of trust and honor. He is a man of peculiar disposition and intensely vindictive. He always pursued a policy of rule or ruin. And to some extent, this policy is responsible for his ruin in business. Ever since his coming to Washburn in 1887, he has acted upon the line that a man who did not do business with him was his enemy. And upon his entering politics as a candidate, he held to the same rule. The man who opposed him for office was put under a ban, and he did everything he could to injure him. Sounds vaguely familiar. But Probert himself came right out and said it. Letter that he wrote from Washburn during his first incarceration. I find it, and here he is again. Here he is in prison in New Mexico. Let's take a look at the two of them together, the beginning and the end of his career. And what does he say? Writes a letter from jail down to one of his friends. I find it's a great mistake to believe or think good people are the most lighthearted and contented. They are usually bothered by conscience and worried about everlasting damnation. My experience has shown that this beautiful world is mostly enjoyed by airy sinners who are clever enough to escape detection and make money whenever they can get a chance. And he sums up his philosophy of life that way. So we're still left with unresolved question. Before, we didn't know where he went after New Mexico. I'm going to predict we know his next stop Greetings from hell, everyone. Good night. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you all. We have some time for a few questions if the
I
audience.
am going to go back as instructed.
All right.
I am not going to cross the line of permission, except I'm going to go back here.
All right, very good.
And if you have any questions, I'll be by that lady back there selling.
Perfect.
Oh my God. Yes. I should mention, little model Washburn banks, still for sale left, right? Yeah, okay.
Beautiful.
You'll want one as a souvenir, I guarantee you.
And the profits go to the Washburn
Don't touch
area.